Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Wishall, your host. And today I'm so honored to bring you Gil Hedley. I met Gil briefly this past summer, June of 2023, when I was in a fresh cadaver dissection lab that was hosted in his lab in Colorado Springs. And I've known about his work for years, since I first trained as a Rolfer over like 8-10 years ago. So Gil has his background as a Rolfer. He's been doing dissections and teaching dissections for close to 30 years now. And he is actually the reason kind of why I wanted to do a dissection. I mean, there's to actually feel like I could do it. He has such a deep reverence for the human body. And one of his perspectives of, doing hundreds of dissections is variation is the norm, meaning you're not variation from the norm, but variation is the norm. No single body is the same. And being that my intention with this work with radical embodiment is to really support us in learning how to love our body through learning how to inhabit our body, so that we don't see our differences or our, things that society or conditioning has maybe made us feel wrong about our body as wrong or bad, or judge ourselves for that, but instead that we can come into relationship with them, that we can come into love with them, so that we can feel more connection, experience more in our life, and have more life force to put towards living a life the way we want to live it. And so I think Gil is just phenomenal and phenomenally intelligent, yet like so in connection and humble with his humanness, that his perspective that he has to share on embodiment is awesome. He takes it from not just embodying your body, but how you can embody consciousness outside of that, and how that impacts the way you relate, the way you show up in the world. So I'm sure that you will enjoy this interview. It really touched and moved me as we were speaking. I actually had tears a few times in my eyes. Inspired me to make some own shifts in how I relate and perceive myself and others. And so I really hope you enjoy. Here's the interview. Hi, everyone. Here I am with Gil Hedley. I referred earlier, I asked how I should just briefly introduce. I said, I'm going to say you're amazing. And I think you said amazing Gil Hedley, ... human. Here. Thanks for being here, Gil. It really is an honor to get to have you on the podcast, to get to interview you. So I'm really grateful.
Thank you, Emily. And I can't promise amazing, but I can promise human.
That, I honestly think with my work and intention, even just with this podcast and radical embodiment, is that we're all human, and unmasking some of those layers that can block us from our humanness, that I think block us from deeper connection. Nice. So the question I always start with is, what embodiment means to you?
Well, in this moment, I think, because if you keep asking good questions over and over again throughout your lifetime, the answer tends to change.
Yeah.
So I think at this moment, to me, embodiment means permitting, allowing, inviting my awareness, my consciousness to be present to this physical form in its most intimate corners and cracks and crevices and unknown places. I think that's partly why I study anatomy. Well, in large measure, it's why I study anatomy, so that I can sort of enter into secret rooms in the building that I might not have been aware of and bring my consciousness there. And that's my embodiment.
I love that. Have there been any personal, and maybe there's a story that comes to mind, experiences or like moments where you've gone in one of those crevices or crannies with your consciousness and felt into that, a sensation, emotion, that something has surprised you that you didn't recognize was there?
Oh yeah, the first time I felt pleasure in my spinal column. I had suffered from many kind of central column dislocations as a pattern of experience over the course of my life. And maybe when I was around 30 something, I was in a Emily Conrad Daoud continuum workshop, wiggling around on the floor with everybody and breathing, etc. And this place in my body that had just been a locus of pain suddenly whispered pleasure to me. And I was shocked. I was changed for life. I
Mm.
never considered that a prospect. My goal was to not be in pain.
Yeah.
It didn't even include the prospect of pleasure.
Mm.
And that was a really profound experience.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's telling. And, in our everyone's own individual way, I think it's common story or narrative of how can we just avoid pain? How can I avoid pain, whether that be physical pain, emotional pain versus, oh, there actually could be a choice of choosing pleasure, choosing to feel good and having that be a motivation or an anchor.
Yeah, it's something in our culture that we have to build tolerance for.
Hmm.
So we have a very high tolerance for pain and for stories about pain,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't have a very high tolerance for pleasure or stories about pleasure. I think in our Puritan rooted culture, there's a deep rooted suspicion, even though the Puritan roots are forgotten, there's a deep rooted suspicion in our culture around pleasure. It's like any intimation of pleasure is like a slippery slope to hedonism. So best to avoid it altogether and settle for pain, which is salvific. Suffering is rewarded in our
Mm.
religious culture. Oh, she suffered so bravely till the end,
Right.
and it's like no one ever says she was ecstatic so bravely till the end. She orgasmed her way out of the planet. She, I'm saying, why are we ashamed to imagine that? But we
Mm-hmm.
so readily adopt a pain approval uh, consciousness.
Yeah, I like how you even named like no one ever thinks of like, oh, she was so brave to like live ecstatic.
Yeah.
And I think that actually is a really brave choice to just be in your ecstasy and be in your own like allowing yourself to feel really good and expressing that outwardly.
Yeah, conducting that channel, conducting that frequency on the planet is a great service.
It is.
It's not to
It
say
is.
pain will be gone.
Yeah.
If you're a body in gravity, there's pain,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean that pleasure need be excluded or that we be intolerant of it. That when you're
Mm.
standing in the grocery line, you can feel good. You don't just have to feel bad. But I know from my own, religious cultural upbringing as a pious Catholic boy, baptized in the 1963, that the suspicion of pleasure and the body in general, the body as is crucified and something, the Savior is crucified in the body, and you want to be like that at a certain level. That's the consciousness that's imprinted on you. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, I want to, you want to be Jesus on the cross, but where's Jesus resurrected? Isn't that what we're celebrating? But we're looking at, Jesus on the cross all year long. And then Easter comes along, and the Easter season is actually longer than the Lent season. It's 50 days rather than 40, but you'd never know it from the way it's practiced in the trenches, where you just kind of go back to that suffering mode pretty quickly.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, because I was also raised very Catholic, went to Catholic school through my senior year, K through 12.
Uh-huh.
My family, my parents especially, are very devout. It's not my practice. But yeah, I immediately went to my head of being a little girl in church. And yeah, that's 40 days of Lent. Everything's covered. It's dark. It's sad, giving up sugar. I'm trying to be a good girl.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know there was 50 days to the Easter season.
Yeah,
It's like
no
one
one
day
does.
of celebration. It's like, oh, now we get to eat
Yeah,
chocolate.
only the daily mass goers know that. I was a daily
Yeah.
mass goer for 10 years, all through college and grad school.
Mm, mm.
Longer than 10 years. Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, actually, if you don't mind, because you've been in the dissection anatomy world for over 30 years, is I believe just
I
around there,
guess about 30 years. Yeah.
about 30 years.
Yeah.
And so if you can kind of take us from, what you just shared, daily mass goer, college, grad school, into kind of your belief and reverence for the body. Now, I mean, I experience you as someone, a human, a person, a teacher who's deeply reverent for the human body, who's deeply reverent for others' experiences, in a way that feels really like clean and compassionate and kind.
Mm.
And I'm
That
not
I can
really,
credit to the Catholicism.
oh,
I learned a lot of about compassion and kindness and service and all that. It wasn't all bad.
yeah, well, I appreciate you saying that, because that was what I was wanting to make a point. I'm not trying to like juxtapose that like Catholicism or religion can't be that.
Yeah, no, very much it
Um,
can be.
but yeah, do you mind just kind of like sharing a little of your own story and kind of how you got into this deep, very specific world of work
Yeah.
that you do?
Well, as a young person, I absorbed that culture. And at the same time, I turned 13 and was suddenly muscularly transparent. I was ripped, you know, and I started lifting weights and got into the culture of Arnold Schwarzenegger's bodybuilding in the 70s and got big. And it was really fun to see my body change. And I was amazed by my body at the same time that I was deeply suspicious of it and filled with anxiety over my sexuality. And that I was also like, damn, this thing's cool. Look at, you do these behaviors, lift your arms, bend your elbows, squat up and down, and you get these big muscles. This is fun. And there's all kinds of approval for that amongst the kids at school. And so I got into that. And it was also a great outlet for my rage and my youthful rage and anxiety was to lift weights. And so I did that. And then when I got to college, everything sort of unwound and I started losing weight. I stopped eating. I was very anorexic-y. My girlfriend was anorexic. Her roommate was bulimic, and we all got on real well together at the cafeteria. So I kind of, again, changed my body, but just like accidentally, got into fasting as a pious Catholic lover of St. Francis. And I really went up and down. But I still had this interest, and I worked in the biology department and with bagging fetal pigs and working with smelly things in the laboratory and by the time I got to grad school, I realized wow, I'm not even in my body. I am so far out of my body. That's not even a home. I left it. I had left the building until it was pure intellect at that point. And
Is there something that happened that helped you to see that you weren't in your body, or?
There were, I was like a ACOA kid, kind of adult child of an alcoholic. So by the time I got to grad school, just smells would put me out of my body. Like if I smelt wine or something or beer, I would literally leave the building. So I was very afraid. I was terrified, and the body was just maybe it was an anxiety producing, terror filled zone. Somehow it became that. And I was like, I gotta get in. How can I, study ethics and be wanting to say things about the body and have no relationship with it at all? I felt like a hypocrite. And also just to survive 8 years at the University of Chicago, I took up with the Tai Chi Club. And I started doing Tai Chi, and that was the beginning of my embodiment journey, I would say. I was suffering a lot in my body. I had, like I mentioned earlier, kind of a dislocated spine. I couldn't keep it together. I now would describe it as, central column hypermobility, but I didn't really have words or categories for that kind of thing. So I'm on the hypermobility spectrum, particularly in my spinal column, which causes all kinds of troubles, which I experienced. I thought, how can I survive my body even and survive my graduate studies as spending hours and hours, 8-10 hours reading a day, so I took up Tai Chi and found that was a wonderful path in. It got me moving in ranges of motion that were alien to me. My range of motions were so tiny at that time. And so Tai Chi expanded me for years. gave me a repertoire of movement, a movement vocabulary that I could play with, and really enjoyed that, and started doing gymnastics. You know, I practiced Tai Chi near the gymnastics club, and they'd be like, "Come play with us." And before you know it, I'm back handspringing my way down the down the way, or doing backflips on the trampoline and having a good time. And so, you know, that was, and I really was like, wow, this is great. And then I heard about Ida Rolf and body work in general. And although I didn't really have any connection still to my own body, I suddenly thought, well, I'd rather do that than be a professor, you know. And so I went to the Rolf Institute and studied with Tom. Tom Myers at the time was leading the pre-training for folks who had no massage background. You know, before you enter the Rolfing training, you had to know something. And so there was a pre-training, and I took that pre-training in 1991, I think. 1991 with Tom, and we've been friends ever since. But and then I started putting my hands on other people's bodies. I started doing massaging my fellow grad students back in Chicago, and really doubling down on my knowledge about the body became intriguing to me again, as it had been when I was a teenager studying the bodybuilding. You know, I already kind of knew all the muscles. Now I wanted to, you know, see them. So I went with a friend into the dissection lab at the University of Illinois, Chicago Medical Campus. And he was studying on Saturdays, and I go in with him and dissect alongside him. And that was my first experience in the dissection lab. And it was horrifying and terrifying and totally compelling to me. And I had to overcome my terror to learn, because I was not a particularly embodied person. So dissection became a path to embodiment for me, along with the Tai Chi practice and then the body work practice, right? And so you became a Rolfer, and now and then I got married, and, you know, suddenly had kids, and the whole family life is very embodying also, right? You have to clean up a lot of poop. You have to, you know, do the things, and having a sex life, you know, all those things sort of, you know, legitimize having a body, right? It needed to be legitimized. That's how bad my disembodiment was. You know, I had to rationalize it. I had to justify the goodness of becoming embodied. And I read Carlos Castaneda's books when I was in grad school, and so much of, I don't know if you know those books, but
I'm familiar with him. I haven't read the books, and it's been years since I thought about him. So I'm glad.
Yeah, he was an anthropologist, and he wrote about 8 books about whether they were fictional or non-fictional remains a debate, but it doesn't really matter. His stories of his learning from this teacher, Don Juan, in the Sonora Desert, and it was much an embodiment practice, really. It was about, you know, inhabiting every cell of your body so you could move it in tricky ways, you know, and you could transform yourself. You could be like a changeling and say, pretend you're an old man when you're a young person, and then surprise somebody with your athleticism or something like that. He did all kinds of tricks like that. And also I got deeply into a teacher, Stylianos Ateshlis, who's mostly known as Daskalos, which is a Greek word for teacher. And he was a Greek Cypriot healer, an esoteric Christian, wrote his own books. Books were written about him, and had a whole series of tapes, you know, cassette tapes that I listened to a million times. And Daskalos, as well as Carlos Castaneda's teacher, were very much about getting all the way into the body, learning anatomy, because then you become conscious, and like literally making your consciousness so aligned with every cell in your body that you could, as a result, shift into the astral plane willingly and travel with the body, you know. So that once you sort of awaken in every cell in your body, then you can disappear. and reappear, because you're the master of that material expression of your consciousness, not just going for a ride, right? So the saints, and that resonated with me, with the Christian saints, right? With the, you know, in the Acts of the Apostle, you know, they said, and he disappeared, there's whether it was Jesus or the apostles, they become theodicized, they awoke, and their body was then just like clothing you could put on and take off at will wherever you wanted to. And so I thought, I didn't have the word embodiment at the time, but I was like, that's the ultimate mastery, right? Is when you're not afraid for your body, right? Because it's just it's an outfit that you wear. And it's an expression in a plane of consciousness at a rate of vibration, right? And you can accelerate your vibration also to such a rate, to such a level that you can travel.
Pretty fucking awesome.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa. Yeah.
Yeah, we just settle, we don't even think about those things.
Yeah,
And
right.
we settle and we let our vibration be, I'm hungry, I'm turning a doorknob, I have to work, darn it all, it's tax season, and our consciousness is completely occupied. And I believe intentionally, call me a conspiracy theorist, but yeah, it's how you control a population, distract us and keep us so busy that we never actually engage in the practices that would bring us to a level where the systems of control would be meaningless.
I mean, I resonate with that. And I mean, I think it's even similar, I know we talked a little bit about my work and book, but like, I think even the conditioning, and I know it's not just for women and female, I just think it's so much more pushed on us as young girls to look a certain way, to be a certain way, to like have that be your weight and physical appearance, like tied into a woman's weight and worth, I think is a way to it's like a patriarchal way of controlling us to not really be able to tap into our life force, because so much energy is going into, oh my God, what am I eating? What do I look like in this? Which is just bullshit noise.
Yeah.
And
I would say as a slight counterpoint, I think it's less patriarchal than the commodification and problematization of the body. It's more about money and marketing than it is about systems of control, because guys are just as subject to unrealistic models of the body and impossible ideals of physicality. It's like, sorry, I'm not a superhero. It's just not happening here. I'm a fleshy person, what have you. And you do have massive disdain, body disdain, in the guys too. Sadly, but to me, that's more about the problematization of the body by the marketing culture, which then sells you and commodifies solutions to problems that they've created. So you can convert people's consciousness into a sense that their body is a problem rather than a gift. And then since it's a problem, we're going to help you fix it. And here's what it's going to cost: this many billions of dollars for this industry and this many billions of dollars for that industry. Right. So we're really locked into a culture of consumerism that's based on the commodification of our bodies being problematized as wrong, needing fixing, whether your skin's too dry or too oily or too
there's always something
not tan enough, or too heavy, or not you have fat, but it's in the wrong spot. It should be on your chest and on your hips, not on your belly or on your thighs, so it's like, fuck you, that we just can't keep up with it, so I just recommend that people don't buy that.
Which takes me to something you said just a little bit ago of, you're like, it's almost like it feels like a big spectrum too of this, thinking of your body as a way, like that problem mind and just like trying to get through the day, which to me feels like dull and contraction, versus what you were kind of alluding to of being able to really weave and be with your consciousness in every cell. And this, like, that felt like so exhilarating and amplifying to me. And you shared of, part of like starting to like not fear the body, and not like have fear of what the body. And so it wasn't exactly language like that, but around that, are there ways that for you that supported you in this, or ways that you might just suggest to somebody else who's kind of on this journey experience of what are some tangible supportive ways to help lessen that
Mm.
fear that one might have of their body, or
Yeah.
that belief that their body is a problem.
Yeah, for me, it's been the study of anatomy. So to
Yeah.
me, the study of anatomy is like walking up to the Grand Canyon, right? And you stand there at the precipice, and it's a rare person who doesn't feel awe and wonder at the rim of the Grand Canyon. It's almost impossible for our being not to, or
Mm,
if you
mm,
are in an ideal situation, not too much light, and you look at the Milky Way at night,
mm,
you can't help but be in awe. And I have found that to be the case when I stand at the precipice of the human form and then go hiking in it, then go
mm,
trail riding, go
mm,
following tracks. And that's what the study of anatomy is to me. It's being at the precipice of the universe and then falling into it with wonder and excitement. Like, oh my gosh, look at this thing here. What is that? Like it's squiggly. It looks like a river. I got rivers inside of me. I have canyons. I have rocky outcroppings. I have
mm,
soft squidgy things. And this is all some kind of artifact or footprint of my life, and
mm,
it makes me super curious to look
mm,
at it.
mm,
I'll be in
mhm,
the lab this afternoon. I can't wait.
mm.
My friend is teaching a class, and I'm going to go pop in on his class for a couple hours. And
Oh,
it's like, oh, what'll I see? Because it's almost, I can say to a number. I've never seen a cadaver where I didn't see something I'd never seen before.
mm, mhm,
Because how do you see the whole universe? You have to keep going back and going back. And
mm,
so when the curiosity and when you engage curiosity for the body rather than, like we talked about, avoiding it or being afraid of it or angry at it, I mean, it takes some courage,
yes,
frankly. It takes
mhm,
some courage to approach the complexity of the body and not be worried about a test or something like that. I don't have any tests in my dissection lab. It's to me, it's like a sandbox. It's a playground. There's no tests at the playground,
mm,
except maybe how well you can get along with one another, which is definitely part of working with a group. But I challenge people even in that and say, hey, we're all on this raft going down the canyon river together, and we got to link arms and watch out for each other and take
mm,
care of one another. And so I build a community, a culture of mutual support so that
mm,
we can, be brave really and step
mm,
forward to this layer and then the one past it and the one past that, and be willing to be provoked, to
mm,
be brave enough to be provoked by what you encounter in the body. So it's like, oh, wow, this makes me really excited and thrilled, and I think it's beautiful. And something else that's like, oh, MG, I am horrified, I am disgusted, I know I don't like this place, and to uh, build in your own consciousness an inventory of your responses and reactions and relationships
mm.
to the tissues, so you can say, oh, some of this I really like and some of this I just hate it. Now
Yeah,
here's the news, folks: you can't hate it, you got to love it,
yeah,
you got to love it all. And so what then I do is I help build, once people notice their reactions, I help to build the aspects of appreciation for that thing they might be
mm,
disgusted by or afraid of. And then they're like, oh, okay, that's not so scary. That's not so bad. That's actually doing me a favor every day. That's actually on my side. That's
mm,
actually part of who I am. It's okay
mhm.
to accept these dark corners.
Yeah. And I think that was telling, I was in your lab. You weren't the teacher of the dissection lab that I did, but it was hosted in your lab. And I went into, you were one of the reasons why I wanted to do a like fresh cadaver dissection lab. I'd been in cadaver labs several times in the past, but always, preserved in formaldehyde and only observation.
Mm,
And I had my own belief of, oh, I could never dissect a cadaver, right? Like I get queasy, I'm going to pass out.
mm,
so day one I entered of like, oh my God, am I even going to be able to participate in this?
Yeah.
Like, what have I signed myself up for? And was fascinated. You know, we spent day 1 and 2, I think, specifically working with the superficial fascia and the adipose tissue.
Mhm.
And I remember it was after one of the days, Monday or Tuesday, I was in an Airbnb with some friends who, you know, we all met because of the lab. And I sat in the backyard against a tree and just did a little like meditation at the end of the day, and had this like such felt sense of my adipose tissue and superficial fascia in a way that was like, I've never experienced before. It was really profound that totally also shifted my own perspective of my fat tissue, of my adipose, and recognizing once we remove that, the form, that cadaver, the person, it no longer really looks like them. And just the deep level of protection and the energy of that. Yeah. But what was coming to me as you were sharing kind of like, you know, what do we love in the body or what do we not? And you kind of loving it all is, I it was gorgeous to see the diaphragm and the psoas was like just stunning. And I was until I was working on like the inferior psoas, like deep kind of pelvis area, and the intestines had been removed. There was some adipose tissue there that like was really stinky. Really. And I kept wanting to be there, but then like going away because I was like, I don't know. I was like, I got to work another part of the body. This is.
It sounds like you ran into some stray poo.
I mean, I think that there's some poo was on the adipose tissue.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So it was that wasn't so pleasant. That wasn't, so.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I like to say the sacred stuff is all.
Yeah.
The sacred stuff is all. So it's the stink and the beauty. And if we can, then this is part of this expansion of consciousness, right? To actually welcome, you know, some of the nasties, because there's not a saint on the other side of the pearly gates, right? Who didn't poop themselves, who didn't fuck up, you know, who didn't hurt somebody, who didn't maybe even do great injury while they were on the planet, but managed to forgive themselves, but managed to accept it as part of the bigger picture, managed to get beyond their regret so that their consciousness could expand even further. So we have, we're in a mixed bag world with multiple layers of vibration, and it's all the sacred stuff. You know, it's all included. So if we just look at our body as a model of that, try and understand it right now, there's massive destruction happening. You know, your spleen is breaking down red blood cells. There's enzymes that are apoptosing cells all over your body. You know, hundreds of thousands, millions of cells are being destroyed right now. Now, if you were in the community of that cell's consciousness, you'd be like, oh, we just lost Bob. You know, loved him so. I've been parked next to him for 35 hours and it was a beautiful experience. And now he's gone. You know, it's like, or you're the little red blood cell coursing through, tumbling through a capillary, you know, one by one, and coming out into the larger venual pathway, and you don't think of yourself as blood. You're just a little consciousness of a little red blood cell just getting along, and then maybe there's a cut, right? And all of a sudden a bunch of you like crowd through the open door and look and see a world. And you're like, whoa, you know, you've been brought up to the seventh heaven, like Paul, and on the road to Damascus when he was still Saul, and he's like, whoa, there's more, and yet here we are you know, the consciousness of this whole community of trillions of cells. And we are mourning the losses here and there, right? And seeing what we perceive as suffering. And yet there are even larger steps that consciousness can expand to, where the whole earth becomes your body, and the processes that are occurring on it and the seeming violences are part of a larger story of life, and that earth itself is just a cell in a galaxy, you know, pulsing. And the bigger you go, and you're like what we talked about embodiment, like at the very beginning was embodied. I gave you one story of embodiment, but maybe another story of embodiment is the expansion of your consciousness to include the body that you are beyond your skin, to see and experience and become conscious of the continuities between my body and yours, and our bodies and the earth, and our earth and the galaxy, and our galaxy and the universe and beyond. And where does your body really stop? And why do you presume that it stops at your skin? Why do you lock your consciousness into a skin sack as if that's who you are, when we know we're going to shed it? And I'm pretty convinced personally that I will continue in the sense that I am. You know, I feel a deep confidence in that, because I've already, this is, I didn't have this when I was a baby. This is a totally different body. And yet I still know myself to be who I am. I can't, if embodiment stops at my skin, it's not enough for me at this point. Because I know that there are within the body subtle interfaces, right, between this thing and that thing and the mind's consciousness. It says, oh, here's rectus femoris, and here it's shearing over the vastus intermedius, and there's a membrane there, and people don't even see the membrane because they know those words and they want to see those things, and so they cut them apart and don't see that they're not apart, they're continuous, and that there's an interface between them, and that there is no one thing and the other thing. It's a continuous thing. And then I can become suspicious and look at you and look at me and say, well, are you rectus femoris and I'm vastus intermedius? And there's actually a continuity between us. It's subtle, but it's not so subtle if I said something mean to you, right? Or something kind and loving, right? And then that we would be mutually experiencing that exchange, whether for good or for painful, because we're continuous. And we can share experiences that are bridging these bodies. Our electrons are jumping back and forth between each other. I exhale and you inhale.
Yeah, right.
Right? What the heck? Think about it.
That's a really good tangible example of that. Actually, I really like that. Yeah.
We're having, so when you are becoming embodied, right? Like you can be not even in the physical, like I was in grad school, where you're just floating around above it, or you can maybe climb into this little suit with your attention and with your awareness. But do you know what's going on in your big toe right now? No, you don't know, probably, in the details, right? So,
and just right before you said that, I actually just moved. I had my legs crossed. I'm like on the bouncy ball, and I just crossed it. So my big toe, I just rested on this metal rod. So I was like, actually, I'm pretty aware because I just
okay, good.
But
so
what about not normally?
Right. But the thing is, so maybe it's your elbow that you're inadvertent to in the moment. And if we're inadvertent to some place in our body, and we're inadvertent to 99% of it, I would say, then why do we count the body as ours and what's going on in the apartment building next door as not ours, as other? right? When we're as inadvertent to what's going on in the apartment building next door as the apartment building in our liver. And yet we call this ours and we call that other. It's ridiculous. Ours is whatever we are consciously present to. And so your body isn't even yours if you haven't showed up in it yet. No less the building next door. But if you do manage to get inside your own home, what we identify as our own home, and find out that then you fill it up and you can go beyond its limits, and you can bring your consciousness into a plant or a tree or an animal, or empathize with another human being, or empathize with the ocean or the mountains or the planet.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, it's beautifully said, and it's a beautiful way to be in the world and relating, that it's not so me, them, here, so dissected in this separatist idea.
Exactly.
That I think also, our world is hurting people, and can bring us more into connection as we expand embodiment just from ourselves into that. I think of even, how would that even influence my day-to-day choices and actions? I actually think quite a bit.
Quite a bit. How can you hate on another person's body when you've expanded your consciousness enough to recognize that you are continuous with them, that you are one with them? There is no separation. It's a trick being played by your brain, is misperceiving the reality. We are walking around lying to ourselves, misperceiving reality as a pile of separate things rather than a continuity.
Yeah. And something that came to me a little bit ago, when you're talking about, you this can't be yours until you're in here, speaking of your body, of when I moved to Boulder about 10 years ago. When I was first living in Boulder, my first few months, I'd go up, like drive an hour, 90 minutes into the mountains with this 5 of us women from Boulder. We carpooled together this women's house for this little women's group. And the facilitator, the teacher of the group, was one of our first meetings. And I was had instant community when I first moved to Boulder at the Rolf Institute. And then the reality was 10 weeks after like the training, everybody moved away until to come back. So all of a sudden I was like, I don't know anybody. And I was really struggling with finding community, finding belonging, finding connection. And Tanya Vaughn was a teacher's name. And I'll never forget her saying to me, because I was kind of sharing this and sharing that I feel like I didn't belong. And she shared with me, she's like, Emily, you will never belong until you first belong to yourself. And that really landed. And I think it speaks to a part of kind of, and you can of course counter, let me know if it feels different, but what you're speaking to of like belonging to ourselves first in this way. But then as we really allow that to be anchored and felt, how that actually expands us out to really feeling full interconnectionness and that continuity between ourselves, others, the planet, our animals outside. Yeah,
absolutely. And we do the same thing with our possessions. We have stuff, and we haven't ever really paid attention to it enough for it to belong to us, right? So, because if you pay attention to something well enough, then the physical thing is no longer needed, right? Because you've got it. We take pictures of things all the time now, thinking that I've got it. I can't lose it now because I have a picture. The memory is stored in my phone, and now it's mine. But when do you actually go through those pictures? You don't. But if you did, and you actually paid attention, to a thing or an object or something beautiful, if you were looking at something beautiful and you settled there for just a minute and paid attention to that view and really let it soak in, you don't need the picture. It's yours now. You've extended your consciousness to it, and now you can't lose it, right? So what do we have to fear? How can we turn our world, instead of being a place of fear with regard to our possessions or our memories or whatever, What if you're actually there for it? Then
Yeah, right.
it burns a couple of neurons together into your gyri there, and now it's yours.
Mm.
And yet your hands are free. You know, you don't need it.
Mm.
Um,
So speaking of this, continuity, this idea, being that you just spent, I think, about a year doing a really intensive, was it a year? I want to talk about your nerve project and kind of go
I spent 5 months actually,
5 months. Okay.
January through May, a little bit into June, but basically 5 whole months in the lab, full time dissecting, with a specific intent to engage, relate with, understand nerve tissues more deeply. So I call that a tree, right? The nerve. Instead of speaking about the nervous system, I like to talk about the nerve tree on my model of the onion tree for the human body, that we have textural layers that are interpenetrated with branching fractal tree forms. We got whether it's our heart tree or our nerve tree or our bone tree for that matter, we're having these beautiful self-repeating patterns of branching, the same as what we see growing out of the ground. And we're just like a little bud that like nipped off the earth and started walking around with our trees. We're like trees on the move. And I wanted to understand better the relationship of that tree to the textural layers that I love so much, because if you dissect by layer, as I have over the past 30 years, you're constantly pruning that tree, pruning it hard. And so you don't get to experience the tree as nicely as you might if you were saying this dissection is about the tree rather than about the whole body continuous textural layers. So I had to kind of shift my dissection style considerably to do this project, because I had to basically destroy the things that I've been, trying to bring forward and show. But I think I've done that. If you want to understand textural layers, I have got that down for you, and I can present that, and I have. It's all on my website. But what about the tree? I was like, I got to the end of this Anatomy from A to Z project, which was 17 straight months in the lab and 18 months of editing. So I spent about 3 years to do the A to Z project from start to finish. And I was like, dang, I still got to do a whole other dissection project to demonstrate the tree, the nerve tree. And so that's what I did. And it came out really cool. It was beyond my expectations, and it was way harder than I imagined it to be. It's hard to dissect that tree.
Oh, I can't imagine. I mean, of course, you've been doing dissection for so many years, but I can't.
Well, it was like starting from scratch. I had to use different tools because, I'm a master of scalpel work and quick order in a class. I can move things along, and that's part of my job. Is basically, I have a very good sense and relationship, like as a sculptor, with the textures of those layers, whether that be the skin or the adipose, or the different layers of fascia, etc. I'm very competent in handling those layers, but I have to put the scalpel down to dissect the nerve tree. You got to do that with a paddle. You got to do that with a blunt instrument, and just literally molecule by molecule pet through those textural layers, macerating them, destroying them, so that you can see the tree that's giving them their integrity, and witness the branching of that tree, and then follow it back. How far back can you follow it? Can you follow it from the dermis to the spinal cord? Well, yeah, turns out you can. And that's how you know you got a nerve. It keeps on going. And so it's going all the way back to the trunk, right? And so it gets bigger as you go. It's very challenging to start at the surface, and there's, it's very tiny.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that a nerve even? Can we tell? You'll see pictures of it in about a week.
I'm really excited. It's pretty phenomenal that you were able to do that. So
Yeah.
and will be so educational for so many folks. And I like, yeah, that you even just said like that this is the tree that's giving the integrity to all the layers that you've spent so much time with. But like how can we see this tree? So what
Yeah.
a gift.
We had about, I just taught in Colorado Springs here at home a few days ago, and we had about 10 Rolfers there. It was like
Oh,
eight or nine freshly minted Rolfers from the Institute who had like graduated that morning and
oh
came to
wow.
my
Oh,
talk.
amazing.
It was really fun.
Oh, cool.
And there were a couple other stray Rolfers in the room who got to meet those new ones.
Mm,
It was really, really fun. They had a great time.
that's very cool. Yeah, what a cool thing to do right after graduating.
Yeah, tell all your Boulder Rolfer friends to come, please.
I have been.
Yeah.
I think 3 or 4 people or another just a couple body workers, but I'm like keeping like, let's all go together. Let's go.
Wonderful. Yeah, it'll be fun.
So I like to kind of, I mean, I could ask you, there's a few more things in my head that I was like, oh, I want to talk about this and this, but for time's sake, we'll save that. And so kind of like a wrapping, concluding question I like to hold and offer is, what suggestion or practice would you give to somebody who's desiring to live a more embodied life? Which I think is a radical choice in our world today.
Yeah, literally. I would get out a piece of paper and a journal page and a pen and literally just start listing what you appreciate about your body. Like just make 100 things
Mm,
that you appreciate about your body. Like,
yeah.
and post that on the bathroom mirror
Mm,
as a reminder that most things are going right with your body. That
mm.
literally trillions of successful cellular operations are occurring just to enable you to complain. You know, and
Oh man, when you say it like that, it's like, well, shoot, like, I better not complain.
well,
Yeah,
when you're complaining, just pause for a moment
sure.
and
Yeah.
appreciate, whoa, there's a lot going right that's allowing me to do this. It's
Yeah.
literally just again, it's like a shifting of your attention
Mm,
from
hmm.
problem to gift, problem to gift, problem to gift.
Mm, hmm. I love
It'll
that.
change your life.
Yeah, it
You'll
will.
have a different experience of your life.
Yeah.
And it's that simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Gil, so much for being here. I was really moved and I'm inspired like by what you had to share. And I'm sure listeners will be too. Like you're so, I think, just insightful and humble and I think you being so in connection with your own humanness allows us all to be. And I think that also is why at least I find you, so inspiring. You're just real in who you
Thank you,
are.
Emily.
So
I'm real's a nice way. I've done fake. I like real.
me too. Me too. Where can people find out more about your work? And also, this will be coming out probably, I think, mid-November. So I know you'll still have some nerve dates.
Oh, I'll have
Yeah,
another 90. We're literally,
great.
Rachel and I are going to be in our RV and we're going to go to 110 cities or so. And
Awesome.
so if you live somewhere in the United States or Canada, we're probably going to be within an hour of you. And I hope I'll get to meet you there. It's very easy to find information on it. Just go to my name, gilhedley.com. And there's a link at the top of the page for the Nerve Tour. But
Awesome.
also, I have 20 plus hours of free content on my website in the form of my Easy Rider membership.
Mm.
So you can just join my website and basically get my whole learning curve is already there for free. And then on top of that, I have my Explorer membership. And there I have now over 270 hours of approved CE content,
Wow.
all body stuff, right? So if you really want a deep dive go into the Explorer membership. I have 30 plus courses there,
Wow.
all on camera dissection.
Wow, that's incredible. Awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd
I
really
cover
recommend
a
anyone.
lot of ground. I mean, it's like a career tool. My
Yeah.
website is, and people just don't know about it because I haven't advertised it yet, but I'm 3 years into it. And once
I'm
I
like,
had Nerve Project, I filmed for 97 days for the Nerve Project. So I
wow.
haven't edited that footage yet. I'll try and do it as I travel, and certainly when I'm back home, but that will also end up on the website.
Awesome. What a valuable resource. Yeah, I'm joining the Explore. I'm like, okay, thank you. I need to make sure
Oh
I'm
yeah,
doing
it's cheap. It's $15 a month or
so
$150 a
great.
year.
So
I
great.
made an extremely low bar of entry for accessing this material because I am committed to democratizing access to this kind of anatomy knowledge.
Which is awesome. Yeah, and I would really encourage anyone, no matter what level of anatomy knowledge, little to a lot. And if you feel like, oh, I don't know this, also to go to Gil's website and check out all every resource, and
Yeah, it's
the
pretty
wonderful
deep.
place to start.
Yeah, it's a deep site. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Awesome.
Woohoo! See you soon.
Woohoo. Woohoo. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and go to Gil's website, check out his work, and yeah, just thank you again for being here, Gil. I'm really honored and yeah, touched by this.
My pleasure. My
Thanks.
pleasure.
All right, take care, everyone.